Today I'm going to give you 3 creative tips for using the Sandmarc ND filters with the Osmo Pocket in the video coming up. Hi, I'm Breck Aramella with breckaramella.com, and in this video I'm going to go to 3 different locations and show you how to use these ND filters which Sandmarc sent to me. So I'm going to show you how to use it in more creative ways or ways that you normally don't use ND filters. So let's open these up and then let's get right into the video. So inside you have these 4 ND filters, okay? And this is nice because it has ND4, ND8, ND16, and ND32. So you have a wide range. And the thing about these filters, they're not just normal ND filters. These are actually ND polarizers. So what the polarizer does is it adds more saturation and more vivid tones to the image. It really makes the greens and the blues pop out from the image. The ND part of the ND filter is sort of like sunglasses for your lens. That's what I like to call it. So it just makes things darker. It really doesn't change the color too much, but I'll explain that as we go along in this video. Now these filters come in a nice little case, has a little thing here for your thumb so you can just open it up, and inside you have the 4 filters. I gotta say they're really well made. I think it's made of aluminum, so they're really solid. They're made of metal, not plastic. And they're magnetic, so I just put it on the Osmo Pocket like that, and then it just sticks right there, right on the front. All right, one thing to note, in this video, I sort of used it as an experiment or as a test to show you both what to do and what not to do so that you can see the things that I did well, and then I'll explain the things that I could have done better in order to help you as a filmmaker. These 3 tips are a way to add more creativity to your filmmaking right away, but you can sort of implement it to your particular style. So as you go, you may change, just tweak a few things, but I'm going to explain all that in this video. So let's get started. So since I'm in Florida, I went to one of my favorite places, the beach, and on the beach I saw this lifeguard house. All right, the nice thing about ND filters, like I said, it makes the sky, the ocean, anything with a blue or a green color really pop out. Basically anything outdoors, because you're always going to have the sky. You might have water, plants, grass, anything with nature. ND filters really help out a lot, especially the ND polarizers, because the polarizer makes it pop out. So I used some of PGY Tech's accessory mounts in order to attach the Osmo Pocket and mount it to my tripod, but I also added the wireless module because I wanted to see what I was shooting with my phone. So I wanted that screen real estate, and using the Osmo Pocket a lot, I find the wireless module is really a tremendous accessory to have. So I used that along with the shoot, and I just set it up, made a nice composition, and just took a picture. Now one thing to note, it was very windy outside, so it was a little shaky. So both for the photos and video, when you slow the shutter down, you might see some blurriness in your image if you don't have a really good tripod and a really stable mount. And I'm going to show you how I messed that up and the way that you can do it in a much better way, but we're going to get to that later on in the video. So I chose to put an ND32 filter on, an ND32 polarizer filter I should say, because I wanted to slow the shutter way down. First I took a normal picture, and you notice the shutter speed is 1/640th of a second. With the Sandmarc ND polarizer filter on, I could lower the shutter much more, and with this slow shutter, you're gonna add a little more smoothness to the image. You're gonna see that in the water, in the clouds. You're also gonna see a little more saturation, a little more vividness. I notice when you use a slower shutter, the colors tend to be a little more vibrant and pop out. And in addition to that, as you can see with this polarizer, it adds even more pop. So you'll notice in the sky, it has that nice rich blue tone. So you can definitely see the gradation in the sky from the dark blue on top to the light blue, and you can also see more details and contrast in the clouds. They're not just white fluffy clouds, all right? They have that grayish and even darker tone to them that you can see this variation. The ND filter really helps bring that out, and it adds more of a three-dimensional feel to your image. So I really suggest using that both for photo and for video. So a lot of people talk about ND filters taking away the glare from an image. Yes, it takes away some glare, but it adds more detail in the highlights, in the shadows, and it adds more contrast almost to the image so that you get more of a three-dimensional image. It's not as flat and basic looking. It has more mystery and more feel and depth to it, and that's really what you want from a photograph. All right guys, so it's really, really windy today. That's why I wasn't talking over there, but I'm behind this lifeguard house right now, so it's sort of protecting me from all the wind. And what I have over here is I have my tripod with my Osmo Pocket, and I'm going to take a picture of the ocean. So the thing about these ND filters is they really make the greens and the blues pop out, as you can see in those previous images, especially in the sky and in the water. Now the point of using them with water is to get that nice slow shutter. So I showed you that with the photos, but now we're going to do it again. So using the ND filter requires you to use a slower shutter to let more light in, because the ND filter is making the camera darker. So when I take this image, you're going to see the waves, and when I don't use the ND filter, it's going to be very, very sharp because it's a high shutter speed. So a high shutter speed freezes everything, but then a slower shutter speed makes everything look nice, silky, and smoother. So as I was shooting the ocean, the sun started going down and it was at a different spot, so I needed a different ND filter. So I put an ND8. I had to experiment with a couple different filters, but I settled on the ND8. Seemed to be right to me. And you'll notice I used a slower shutter. I went down to 1/30th of a second, and this slowed the shutter down a lot. But this slower shutter still had a lot of stuff in focus. It added the part of the wave that moved the fastest was blurry, but the other parts of the wave in the ocean were in focus. So something that's moving really slow, if you don't really slow it down, it's not gonna make everything blurry. Now, one really important tip here in this whole creative process: if something is moving towards the camera or going away from the camera, it's not going to be as blurry with a slow shutter as something that's moving across the frame from left to right or right to left. So if I were to shoot it with the wave going across, if I were to turn the camera and the wave was going across, it would be much more blurry and it would have that nice smooth look, which I probably should have done. But I just wanted to get just the ocean because I wanted a nice clean background. So I should have used a higher ND filter and slowed my shutter down even more. So if you want the water to be nice and silky smooth and almost look more like a lake than an ocean, make sure you have an ND filter like an ND16 or even an ND32 or higher. So for the second location, I risked my life walking up this highway ramp with cars going around really fast around this bend. But I really like the angles shooting down. So what I did was I set my tripod up there and I shot down towards the road below. So the reason I wanted to shoot down at this angle was I wanted to get the cars going by really fast, and I like the perspective of shooting going down. So if you change your angle, shooting really low or shooting really above, shooting down, it's gonna look more interesting to the viewer. Don't always shoot at eye level or sort of at waist level. Try to go real low or real high, and that's gonna add more interest to your image. One thing I wasn't prepared for was that the highway actually kind of shook and kind of moved as the cars drove by. So this was kind of annoying, especially if you're trying to use a slow shutter with a tripod. I learned something from doing this, but I recommend if you can find a sidewalk or somewhere away from the actual road, there will be less movement, especially if you're on something like a ramp or a bridge or something like this. Try to go on the sidewalk rather than the actual road. So my second creative tip is to use an ND filter, an ND polarizer with time lapse in order to make the lights on the cars look like laser beams or shoot across the image. All right, so you add more movement and more feel to the image. Now I did this both with photos, lowering the shutter way down, and I did it with time-lapse video. So the thing about time-lapse video, so you notice the mount that I had was not very stable. My tripod is also not a really professional one because my other one got broken, so I had to use this one instead, my backup. So I recommend you get a really stable tripod and make sure you mount it like this. When you mount it like this, it's gonna be a lot more stable, and I found it not to wobble as much. So that's why you see the image shake, and I apologize for that, but use it as a lesson of what not to do when you do time-lapse. However, there are a lot of good things that happen. So you notice that I shot from when the sun was going down, from daytime to nighttime. So I set the shutter for 2 seconds, but I set the time lapse for 3-second intervals, and that's the lowest it can go. For whatever reason, it's kind of strange with DJI and the Osmo Pocket, but the slower shutter you use, so if you use like 7 or 8 seconds, a really long exposure, the Osmo Pocket will only allow you to use a much higher interval. So an interval every like 8 seconds or every 10 seconds, which will make the time lapse go very fast. Now for this, I was only using a 2-second shutter, so the 2-second shutter allowed me to use every 3-second interval. I wish DJI added a 2-second or even a 1-second, because these lights are moving so fast. So my creative tip here, if you want the lights to move very fast, have your interval number every like 5 or 10 seconds. If you want those lights nice and slow, the lowest you can go is 3 seconds. I wish we could go down to like 1 second. That way the lights still move fast, but they're not moving so fast that we can't really see them. So I like more of that fast feel, but fast so they stay in the frame a little longer. There's nothing we can do about that. That's the limitation of the Osmo Pocket, but it could be updated with a future firmware, but you can see what we get by doing this. So then I took the time lapse down to the sidewalk on the ramp below, and on the sidewalk I also changed the mount as well, and that made everything a lot more secure. The wind was blowing like crazy. I can't really describe that because it's hard to see it, but the wind was just blowing really fast, and the Osmo Pocket was a lot more stable once I changed to that different mount and once I set the tripod down on the sidewalk. And as you can see, I always try to use ISO 100. Always keep your ISO as low as possible. That way the image stays sharp for the parts of the image that you want to keep sharp. And then I lowered the shutter speed as low as possible. With Osmo Pocket, it's 8 seconds. And in this image, I really like because the cars came to a stop. So you can see some of the headlights moving across the image. But when a car stops for a long time, you get that nice clear shot of the car. So it's a nice creative effect. So if you're gonna do this, park the car or whatever you have, whatever thing is moving across your image, I would keep it stationary or still for a few seconds. I would recommend 10 seconds or maybe a little longer than that. And then have everything move across the frame fast, and you'll get that nice variation, something still along with the lights that move across it. Now for the third creative tip, I wanted to do a motion lapse. So I went to one of my favorite parks in Miami, down in South Miami at Matheson Hammock Park, and it's just beautiful. There in the morning, there aren't many people around, the birds are flying around, it has a nice feel to it. The sun is rising, so you see all those colors in the clouds. And I wanted to get a boat moving across. As you can see here, the boats come out of the harbor, and I wanted to do a motion lapse of the boat moving. Of course, this takes a little preparation, or you sort of have to get a little bit of luck to it. All right, you have to time it when the boat is moving out. So I didn't quite time it perfectly. I didn't get that really money shot that I want. If I really wanted to do this, I would have to talk to one of the fishermen, or I would have to just take a whole bunch of shots until I nailed the money shot. But I'm going to show you how to get this shot, and it's very interesting, especially if you're capturing something on water, or if you just want to add a motion lapse to your repertoire of filmmaking. Now if you want to shoot video, normally you use 1/50th of a second. If you're shooting at 24 frames per second, the shutter speed should always be about double whatever your frame rate is. But for this, I use the motion lapse. It's the same principle as the time lapse, so you just go into normal time lapse mode, but then you can press the path button and then you just press plus, so you can add different spots where you want the Osmo Pocket to go. So because I had the wireless module, I just moved the Osmo Pocket from one point to another point with my finger on the screen, just dragging my finger across my phone on the screen. And then I set those different points. You have to experiment with it, but I set the interval to the lowest possible, which was 3 seconds. And as you can see, it's gonna do the time lapse, but now it's gonna move across, and you're gonna get that nice slow shutter because the clouds, the water, the whole environment had that nice soft feel. So I wanted the image to mimic that. So that's why I used a much slower shutter. You can use a higher shutter if you want and experiment with that as well. It's just two different ways of looking at it. But I prefer the slow shutter, and it moves across the image. And I wanted to get it perfectly aligned with a couple of the boats. And of course it would have been nice if it had a much slower interval time. But again, like I said before, the Osmo Pocket goes down to 3 seconds, which is what I recommend you use. All right guys, thanks for watching to the end. I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, press that like button. If you want to pick up the Sandmarc ND filters, I put a link to them in the description below. And as always, if you want to get more tutorials like this, press that subscribe button, and I will see you in the next video.